coming into next season, these are the 10 teams that I think will have the biggest improvements. And starting off at number 10, I've got the Philadelphia 76ers. This is a team in a very interesting spot, with two very different timelines running side by side. On one hand, you've got the older core with Joel Embiid and Paul George, which brings so many questions rather than answers, mostly around their health and whether or not they can stay on the floor consistently. On the other hand, there's the younger core forming, with Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, and now VJ Edgecombe coming into the mix. Edgecombe is easily one of my favorite rookies from this draft class. He's got that Jimmy Butler meets Dwayne Wade type of energy. He's already impressed in the Summer League. He's explosive, a crazy athlete, can finish through contact, and the mid-range jumper is coming along very nicely. Pairing him with Maxey's pace, McCain's shooting, and how he could complement the team overall gives Philly a young trio that's going to be exciting to watch them grow together. Now, figuring out how to juggle these two timelines is going to be the biggest issue for Nick Nurse next season. When do you go to the older group, and when do you just hand the reins over to the younger guys? That is the biggest question. Now, I'm not saying the Sixers are suddenly going to be a playoff threat, but even if Embiid and George aren't always available, I think this team is going to be far more competitive than people are expecting. And for me, they are going to make a noticeable improvement from last season. In at number 9, I've got the Orlando Magic, a team that made one of the more splashier moves over the offseason by trading for Desmond Bane. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know I'm not that big of a fan on this move. It's not because Bane isn't the type of player they need, because he absolutely is. Orlando desperately needed more reliable three-point shooting, and Bane definitely brings that. My concern is more about how Bane gets these shots. He's not just a spot-up shooter who'll quietly space the floor. He's someone who's going to need the ball in his hands to be at his best, and that's where I think the fit gets a little messy. Last season, one of Orlando's bigger issues outside of being ice cold from deep was how they balanced the usage rate between Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Banchero doesn't really have a problem with sharing with Franz, since he's treated as the clear number one guy, but it's when Paolo sits out that Franz can really flourish. In that large stretch where Banchero was sidelined due to injury, Franz looked like a legitimate superstar, averaging 29 points per game for over a month. So now you're bringing in another player in Bane who's going to want more touches and usage. And I'm just not convinced that the integration is going to be as seamless as people think. Then there's the price tag. Orlando gave up 4 first-round picks, a pick swap, plus KCP and Cole Anthony, 2 very good role players. That is a massive haul for a player whose primary value is shooting. And honestly, if all the Magic wanted was some more floor spacing without eating up too many possessions, there were certainly cheaper options out there, like a Luke Kennard or Duncan Robinson. So don't get me wrong, the Magic will almost certainly improve next season just by having more shooting around Paolo and Franz. But the bigger question for me is, what was the cost of this improvement? Is it really worth being a semi-competitive playoff team if your young stars, who the entire league is so high on, aren't developing at the pace you'd like because their touches are getting siphoned off? Maybe I'll be proven wrong and this move will age beautifully, but as of right now, I can't help feeling a little worried about the long-term future of the Orlando Magic. Now, coming in at number 8, I've got the Denver Nuggets, a team that was already great last season. They took the eventual champion Thunder to 7 games in the second round, despite having, let's be honest, no bench to speak of. The lack of a second unit has been their Achilles heel for years now, and the numbers from last postseason really tell the story perfectly. With Jokic on the floor, the Nuggets were dominant, outscoring opponents by 10.9 points per 100 with a 119.9 offensive rating and a rock-solid defense as well. But when Jokic sat, it all unraveled. The bench posted a staggering minus 31.1 net rating. The offense cratered to 97.8, and the defense bled points, giving up 129 per 100. That is a 42-point swing, whether their MVP took a breather or not. So this offseason, Denver had to go to work, and they did. They moved on from the inconsistencies of Michael Porter Jr. and brought in a more stable Cam Johnson, traded for Jonas Valanciunas, signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to a vet minimum, and somehow reunited with Bruce Brown on a vet minimum as well. That is 4 moves, and every single one of them feels like it directly fixes some of their glaring weaknesses. Cam Johnson, while he isn't the most durable player in the world, is basically just a better version of Michael Porter Jr. in basically every way. He's more consistent, smarter with the ball, significantly better defensively, and fits in with Denver's motion-heavy offense. Then there's Jonas Valanciunas, who even in the later stages of his career is still going to be incredibly productive for Denver. Last season, he put up 10.4 points and 7.7 boards on 55% shooting in just 18 minutes a night. That is the kind of reliable backup big Denver's been craving for years. Tim Hardaway Jr. also slides in beautifully. He put up 11 points a night on 36% shooting from 3 last season in a tough Detroit situation without a lot of high-level playmaking. So, now that he's playing off of Nikola Jokic, he's going to be getting some of the cleanest looks of his career, and I think he's going to thrive as a floor spacer in this system. And then there's Bruce Brown. 2 years ago, he was a crucial part to their 2023 title run, even playing his way into the starting lineup. After chasing the bag in free agency and bouncing around to 3 teams, Brown realized just how special Denver was. Forget the money, he's back on a minimum deal, and his ability to guard multiple positions, handle the ball at times, and make spot-up threes makes him the prototype of a championship role player, especially next to Nikola Jokic. Put it all together, and Denver's bench should no longer be a liability. The rotation is far deeper, and the Nuggets are primed for another deep playoff run, as they have certainly improved. In at number 7, I've got the Toronto Raptors, a team that finished last season at a disappointing 30-52, but feels like they're primed to take a step forward. A big part of that optimism comes from Brandon Ingram, who they added mid-season, but still hasn't suited up because of injuries. Last time we saw Ingram fully healthy, back in 2024, he averaged 25-5 a game while shooting 49% from the field in 64 games. He's a proven offensive weapon, but staying on the floor has always been his biggest challenge. Outside of his rookie campaign, where he played in 79 games, he hasn't cracked more than 64 in a season since. But the Raptors' improvement next season isn't just going to hinge on Ingram. Last year, they simply never had their core healthy at the same time. Scotty Barnes played in 65 games, RJ Barrett managed only 58, Grady Dick was limited to 54, and Emmanuel Quickley, who came over in the OG Anunoby trade the season prior, only saw 33 games. Quickley's limited run was promising though. In those 33 games, he did put up 17.1 points and 5.8 assists per game while shooting 42% from the field and 38% from deep. Very solid numbers that suggest he could be a real difference maker with a full season alongside Scotty, RJ, and Grady. So, the big question with the Raptors is whether or not all these pieces are going to be healthy at the same time. Even without Brandon Ingram, a season where the core plays closer to 70 games each would see this team win noticeably more games. But Ingram's addition adds a whole nother layer to the uncertainty. It could really go one of 2 ways. Either his scoring pairs beautifully with Toronto's defense and the collection of versatile wings, or it ends up clunky with too many similar pieces trying to share the floor. But like I said earlier with Philadelphia, I think the Raptors are definitely going to improve upon where they were last season, but it's hard to see them being any more than a fringe playoff contender unless everything, and I mean everything, breaks perfectly. In at number 6, I've got the New York Knicks, a team that's coming off an Eastern Conference Finals run and looks ready to take another huge step forward. Last season, Jalen Brunson officially cemented himself as a top 10 player in the league. And when you pair that elite shot creation with Karl Anthony Towns, then you've got one of the best offensive foundations in basketball. The two were phenomenal all throughout the playoffs, but it was clear that New York still lacked that extra gear to truly break into the contender group. This offseason, they went out and made some changes that could finally push them over the top. First, they made a bold move on the sidelines, moving on from Tom Thibodeau and bringing in Coach Mike Brown from Sacramento. Brown, a former Coach of the Year just 2 seasons ago, has already made it clear that he loves the versatility of the group and plans to play faster. That shift alone, to me, feels massive. For years, the Knicks' slow, Brunson-heavy offense has been effective but predictable, and it arguably capped their ceiling. Now, it feels like the lid could come off. If Mike Brown's up-tempo system clicks, then this team could go from very good to scary good overnight. But the Knicks didn't stop there. New York also added Jordan Clarkson and signed Gershon Yabusele from Philly. Yabusele made his NBA return last year after being out since 2019, and he was able to come right back in and average 11 points per game on 38% shooting from deep. At 6'8", 260, he's a unique weapon. A forward who can stretch the floor, potentially play some small ball center, and hold his own defensively. He's also the perfect system fit, since all of his threes came off assists last season, meaning he thrives without needing the ball in his hands. I see him as a potential X factor off the bench, though he's certainly talented enough to start if need be. Clarkson, meanwhile, is more of a gamble, but a high upside one. He averaged 16.2 points per game last season, though his efficiency does leave some room for improvement at just 40%. Most of his buckets were self-created, which might not translate perfectly into Brown's offense, but when he did play off the ball in Utah, he was able to hit his corner threes at a 50% clip, which is elite. Alongside Brunson and Towns' gravity, Clarkson could easily become a spark plug scorer that New York leans on in the big moments. But maybe the most intriguing part of this team is their defensive potential. Last season, the trio of Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart were supposed to be a nightmare for opposing teams, but that never fully came together. If they could figure that out this year, I believe the group could be the East's version of the Oklahoma City Thunder, forcing turnovers, flying out in transition, and smothering teams with their length and versatility. Pair that with the up-tempo modern offensive system, and suddenly the Knicks are looking like a two-way juggernaut. They've unquestionably improved, and there's every reason to believe that this could be the year New York breaks through as a real contender. But until we actually see Mike Brown's system in effect, I'm holding off on putting them in the top 5. Now, in at number 5, I've got the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that, yes, went out in round 1 last year, but honestly, it might have been one of the more impressive first-round exits you're ever going to see. Expectations were so low coming into last year for the Clippers, yet they still managed to put together a really strong regular season anchored by an elite defensive system. Then once Kawhi Leonard returned, the offense took a massive leap as well. So by the back half of the season, they were looking like one of the more well-balanced teams in the entire league. That first-round series against Denver, it did go the distance, but they were blown out in Game 7. But to say that the Nuggets owned them in that series and were always going to win it is just simply not true, because the Clippers showed that they certainly belonged in the same breath as Denver. Coming into this summer, the Clippers front office weren't keen on just running it back. Instead, they reloaded. Brook Lopez joined the team on a 2-year deal, James Harden re-signed, they traded for John Collins, brought back Chris Paul for his final season, and scooped up Bradley Beal after his Phoenix buyout. Those are 5 major moves, and suddenly the Clippers look stacked with talent and depth. Let's talk about Bradley Beal first. People seem to think that he's now washed just because the Suns couldn't figure out how to use him. But what people are forgetting is how bad of a fit it was for Beal. Booker and Durant monopolized the ball, leaving Beal completely out of rhythm. But even in that poor situation, he still put up 17 points per game on 56% true shooting. Now, he's in a far better spot playing next to James Harden, one of the league's best playmakers instead of shot creators. So don't be surprised if Bradley Beal quietly returns to his all-star form and gives the offense a whole new dimension. Brook Lopez, that signing is also quietly massive. For 2 years, $18 million, the Clippers now have a legitimate stretch 5 and rim protector off the bench. Last postseason, Denver shredded the Clippers, partly because there was no backup big man to challenge Jokic. But now, with Lopez and Ivica Zubac, who is quietly coming off the best season of his career, they now have 48 minutes of great rim protection. The Norman Powell for John Collins swap was another strong move. Collins was actually so good last season in Utah that they literally started making up fake injuries because he was winning them too many games. In just 40 appearances, he was involved in 70% of the Jazz wins, which is just remarkable. At 6'9", with a 40% three-point shot, a lob threat ability, and pick and roll scoring, he gives the Clippers the front court athleticism that they haven't had in years. And whether Collins comes off the bench or is in the starting five, he's going to have a massive impact on what this team can do, especially when it comes to versatility. Then there's CP3. He's not the point guard of old, but heading into his final season, back where he spent 6 memorable years, his basketball IQ alone is going to be a big asset. Even in a limited role, you can expect him to stabilize the bench unit, run plenty of pick and rolls with Derrick Jones Jr. and John Collins, as he's still capable of dropping dimes. This is a team that would have owned the NBA a decade ago, but don't get it twisted, they are still going to be dangerous today. On paper, the Clippers are deeper, smarter, and far more versatile than last season. Health is always going to be the X factor with this team, but theoretically, if the roster can stay on the floor, they're absolutely going to be in the mix. Now, in at number 4, I've got the Houston Rockets, a team that was already terrifying last season as the 2 seed in the West with a 52-30 record, and somehow they've managed to level up in a way that should have the entire league on high alert. The headliner, of course, is Kevin Durant. Adding KD wasn't just a big move, it was a seismic shift in the Western Conference. He feels the single biggest hole that haunted the Rockets in the playoffs last year. Somebody who can just go and get a bucket efficiently. Durant is one of the greatest tough shot makers in the history of the sport. And in Houston's system, this kind of feels like a match made in heaven. For Durant, it's also ideal. In Phoenix, he was being forced to do too much on the defensive side of the ball as well, and that started to chip away at his overall offensive dominance. But in Houston, surrounded by elite defensive players and freak athletes, Durant should be able to get back to what he does best, absolutely eviscerating teams as a scorer. And speaking of those freak athletes, the Terra Twins of Amen Thompson and Tari Eason just added their third member, Dorian Finney-Smith, one of the league's premier 3-and-D players. Last season, Dorian Finney-Smith made 39% of his threes on nearly 5 attempts per game. But when you zoom in further, the numbers get even better. He shot an insane 45% from the corners, where almost 40% of his shots were coming from. So, when you think about Kevin Durant collapsing defenses on every drive, having Finney-Smith open in the corner is going to be the perfect release valve, giving Houston an elite floor spacer who can also be a defensive weapon. Then there's Amen Thompson. I've been saying it. I think this guy is going to be a true star next season. His athleticism is off the charts. The mix of leaping ability, speed, and reckless abandon when attacking the basket makes him one of the more electrifying players in the league. He was already one of the best defensive players just in year 2, and his offense took massive strides as the season progressed as well. He averaged 14.1 points per game last year, along with 8.2 rebounds and 2.3 stocks per game on 55% shooting. Now, with Kevin Durant as a teammate and all of the extra floor spacing that he's about to enjoy, we could be in store for a massive breakout season from Amen Thompson. But even then, Houston wasn't done. They bolstered their center rotation by swapping Jock Landale out for Clint Capella. Even in a reduced role in Atlanta, Capella was still able to put up 8.9 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, and a block a night. He likely won't have to do much more than that with the Rockets. Whether it's backing up Şengün or Adams if they roll the double big lineup as their starting 5 next year, or just coming in every now and then to give them some solid minutes, his addition gives the Rockets a really steady big man rotation. What's so scary is how the Rockets were already the West's number 2 seed. Then they add Kevin Durant and a retooled supporting cast, straight up making Houston terrifying. At number 4 on this list, they're not just one of the most improved teams, but they're also making a case to be the championship favorites next season. In at number 3, I've got the Detroit Pistons. And let's just take a second to appreciate what they just did last year. They made NBA history by becoming the first first team ever to triple their win total from the previous season, finishing with a 44-38 record, crashing their way into the playoffs, and somehow I believe they're about to get even better. I love what the Pistons did this offseason. They kept Paul Reed, who was able to give them some solid bench minutes in their gritty first-round series loss to the Knicks. But the real needle movers are going to be Duncan Robinson and Caris LeVert. Robinson has cemented himself as one of the league's best shooters, and every year he's becoming more of a well-rounded offensive weapon with the strides he's been making as a ball handler and a playmaker. Last season, 73% of his shots came from downtown, where he buried them at a 39% clip, including a scorching 43% from the corners. That level of floor spacing is going to be game-changing around Cade, giving Cunningham more room to break down defenses in the mid-range. Then when we look at Caris LeVert, he brings a completely different flavor. While his three-point shooting at 37% isn't quite at Robinson's level, he offers something Detroit didn't really have last year: a secondary ball handler who can create his own shot. His ability to get to the mid-range and attack closeouts off the dribble gives the offense another dimension, as he's the type of player who can really punish defenses if they fully sell out to Cade Cunningham. But here is where it gets really scary. Detroit is also getting back a key piece who isn't technically new, but he might feel like it: Jaden Ivey. Before the injuries derailed his sophomore campaign, Ivey was already looking like a rising star. He was averaging 17.6 points, 4.1 rebounds, and 4 assists per game on 46% shooting. And the most exciting part, he was knocking down threes at a 41% clip. Then when you combine that with his speed and athleticism, he just might be the perfect complementary piece to Cade as a backcourt partner. And if he can stay healthy this season, this duo might be one of the more electrifying young tandems in the whole league. Of course, everything starts with Cade Cunningham. He is the head of the snake. Last season, Cade made the leap. Fully healthy for the first time in his career, he led Detroit on their playoff charge while putting up MVP caliber numbers: 26.1 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 9.1 assists per game, all while shooting 47% from the floor. He finished 7th in MVP voting. He made his first All-Star team and earned All-NBA third team honors. Doing all of this in just his 4th season. Cunningham's command of the game, his poise under pressure, and his ability to completely take over down the stretches of games has officially put him in the conversations with the best players in the world. And let's not overlook Detroit's identity as a team. After the new year, they were suffocating teams on defense, forcing turnovers and flying out in transition. Their defense was amongst the league's best in the second half of the year, and with the added shooting and creation they just brought in to help them on the offensive end, I think they're about to become even more dangerous. Now, coming in at number 2, I've got the San Antonio Spurs. And let me tell you, this is a leap that has the potential to shake the entire league. Victor Wembanyama was already putting together a monstrous sophomore campaign last season, averaging 24.3 points, 11 rebounds, and a league-leading 3.8 blocks per game, doing it all on 56% effective field goal shooting. Just in that short amount of time, he cemented himself as a top 10 player in the world. But blood clots in his shoulder would cut the season short. But the great news for Spurs fans, those blood clots were officially cleared, and Wemby is expected to be fully ready for opening night. A year 3 Wemby with a clean bill of health, that alone could have landed the Spurs in the top 3. But what puts them here at number 2 is because it isn't just about Wemby. The team is now absolutely loaded. They added De'Aaron Fox midway through last season before the trade deadline, and while he wasn't able to get a ton of games in, his potential fit with Wemby is unreal. Fox is one of the fastest guards in the league, and don't forget, he nearly led the league in scoring just a couple of seasons ago. And here's a little bit of nuance that people aren't talking about enough. Fox being a lefty and Wemby being a righty makes their their pick and roll connection even more smoother. No awkward crossbody passes, just seamless, quick-hitting actions that could become the foundation for their entire offensive system. I'm telling you right now, that action is going to be a nightmare to guard next year. They also made some savvy veteran pickups in free agency, adding Luke Kornet and Kelly Olynyk for depth. And then there was their draft class, adding the second overall pick Dylan Harper and taking Carter Bryant's 14th overall. Both are talented enough to potentially carve out a starting role by the end of the season and are definitely going to be part of their future plans. Then don't forget about the core that's already been growing in San Antonio. You've got Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, and last year's Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle, as this team has insane depth and versatility. Sprinkle in the steadying presence of the veterans like Kornet, Olynyk, and Harrison Barnes, and you've got the perfect balance of youth and experience. This group is long, athletic, defensively minded, and now has two offensive superstars to build around. If they stay healthy, the Spurs won't just improve, they might just arrive. Now, at number 1, I've got the Atlanta Hawks. The team I believe is going to make the biggest leap out of anybody next NBA season. Last year, Atlanta was the definition of mediocre, finishing 40-42 while ranking 18th for offense and 19th for defense. They weren't bad, but they weren't scaring anybody either. But all of that is about to change dramatically. Their offseason was a masterclass in roster building. First, they pulled off the steal of the summer, trading for Kristaps Porzingis from Boston without having to give up anything of real value. Porzingis is the perfect front-court partner for their rising star Jalen Johnson, and he'll be the best pick-and-roll or pick-and-pop partner Trae Young has ever had. And the best part about all of it is how Porzingis doesn't need the ball to be effective. Last season, he put up 19.5 points per game on a ridiculous 41% shooting from deep, while also protecting the rim with 1.5 blocks per game. Yes, the injuries are always a concern. He hasn't played in more than 70 games since 2017, but even 60 games from Porzingis could transform Atlanta's ceiling. Jalen Johnson's return to full health is going to be another massive boost. Before his injury, he was a legit most improved player candidate, averaging nearly 19 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists on 50% shooting. He's athletic, fast in transition, and his playmaking and shooting are also catching up to the physical tools. So, pairing him with KP and Trae makes their starting 5 potentially one of the more dynamic in the whole league. But Atlanta weren't done yet. They added Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency, a 6'5" guard who shoots 38% from deep and brings tenacious defense every single night. His grit and versatility is exactly what Atlanta has been missing, and now they have it. And then there's Dyson Daniels, who quietly came over in the DeJounte Murray deal, but has made his presence more than heard. Daniels averaged 14.1 points per game on 54% shooting, but his defense is what really turned all of the heads. He led the league in steals per game last year at 3, finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and actually won the Most Improved Player award. This guy is a perfect defensive partner for Trae in the backcourt, and if he does share some bench minutes with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the pair are going to be a nightmare defensively. This is, without question, the best roster Trae Young has ever had around him, and with all of this help comes a bit of pressure. Last year, he did lead the league in assists per game at 11.6, but his shooting really dipped, just 34% from deep and 41% overall. If Trae Young can rediscover his elite shooting stroke, I believe Atlanta could be scary good. But based off the recent offseason moves alone, who actually won the offseason? If you want to see the top 10 teams that are set to dominate next season after their moves, you can watch that full breakdown right now.